I said about it at the time is it was banana republicanism.
This is why we have nepotism laws in this country. This is how a banana republic operates.
Makes the country look like a banana republic. They're leaking out of the FBI like it's some sort of secret police organization in a banana republic. Do we want to be a banana republic? Because we're heading down that road. We have the Justice Department seemingly on the edge of prosecuting Donald Trump's political opponent, another giant leap towards banana republicanism in this country. We don't want to be a banana republic. This is what we used to see around the world.
Freedom prospers when religion is vibrant and the rule of law under God is acknowledged.
An informed patriot is what we want.
Welcome to American Family Radio's Focal Point, the home of muscular Christianity on conservative talk radio.
Muscular Christianity.
Where we relentlessly explore the intersection of truth and politics.
The trouble with our liberal friends is not that they're ignorant. It's just that they know so much that isn't so.
Now, here's your host, Brian Fisher.
Howdy, and welcome to this brand new broadcast edition of Focal Point on American Family Radio. The program is Focal Point. I am Brian Fisher, your congenial, convivial, amiable, and effervescent host.
As always.
And good to have you in the conversation. Want to jump right into our time in the Word today. Don't forget, by the way, you can go to afr.net and you can audio stream this program. If you've got friends in the Pacific Northwest that are tired of being mired in a morass of liberalism, they want a clear voice of conservatism with a perspective that is screened and filtered through the Word of God. This is the place to encourage them to come. And they can listen to this program even if they don't have a station in their community by going to afr.net. You can also get an AFR Talk app for your phone and listen on the go. Also got a column that'll be going up soon at afa.net. A title of the column is "The Democrats Are Showing Us How Not to Impeach a President." Encourage you to go there and read it and share it with others that you think may have some interest. Now, turning our attention to the Word of God and to prayer, we are finishing a study today on the life of Esau. Remember, Esau was the one that was designated by God to be the heir, and Jacob cheated him out of his inheritance. And then Jacob had to run for his life, spent the next 20 years of his life trying to stay as far away from Esau as he could. Finally, it becomes clear it's time for him to come back home, and he knows he's going to have to run into Esau, and so he sends all kinds of livestock ahead of him in big clumps, encouraging Esau to accept those as a gift from him to try to placate his anger. Well, it turns out he didn't need it. When Esau saw him, he ran up to him, he hugged him around the neck, and was willing to reconcile. And that was the big lesson, I think, out of the life of Esau, is, all of us have people that we really don't want to see again. And people that we've offended, people that we've wounded, people that we've hurt, and we'd really prefer not to have to interact with them again. Or we may be on the other side of the equation. There may be people who have hurt us, and we really don't want to run into them again. And someday God just says, look, I want you to encounter them. I want you to be face-to-face with them. Are we prepared to do what Esau was prepared to do? That's the question here. Now, I want to go right to prayer with some of these things from the life of Esau, so if you'd be kind enough to join me. Sovereign Lord, I pray this day for myself and for my family and for the listening audience of Focal Point, every man, woman, and child right now within the sound of my voice. And I pray that by your grace, we may learn from the life of Esau and avoid the mistakes that he made. I pray that you will teach us to prize the inheritance that is ours in Christ Jesus. Teach us to resist any temptation of body, soul, or spirit that would cause us to squander our birthright in him or forfeit your blessing. We also pray for the single men and women in our community and nation, that they will choose to marry only in the household of the faith and refuse to become unequally yoked to unbelievers in marriage. We pray that out of your kindness you will give us of the dew of heaven and the richness of the earth. We claim your promise that you will curse those who curse us and bless those who bless us. Keep us from sin when we are angry. May the sun not go down on our anger, so that we do not give the devil a foothold in our lives and relationships. Teach us to forgive, even as we have been forgiven, that we may get rid of all bitterness, rage, and anger, along with every form of malice. Teach us to look to you for justice when we have been wronged, rather than taking vengeance into our own hands. May no root of bitterness grow up in us that would defile not only us, but defile others. Fill us with your Spirit that we may be kind and compassionate to one another. As far as it depends upon us, may we be at peace with all men. I pray that we will seek peace and pursue it, and be prepared to reconcile with anyone from whom we are estranged. These things we ask in the name of Jesus. Amen.
Amen.
Okay, well, let's grab a couple of quick items from the culture here as we get ready to jump into the content of the day. You know, we talked yesterday with Jeff about driving under the influence of weed, and how some lab has come up with a device that will measure the presence of THC in your system, so the police can determine if you have smoked weed in the last 3 hours. Well, here's a story about a guy that got busted for drunk driving on a Segway. On a Segway. You know what those are? Those are those self-balancing little gizmos that you can ride down the sidewalks and stuff like that. He was going the wrong way down a busy road. They pulled him over and cited him for driving a Segway under the influence. And, you know, we've seen movies about people being made invisible and all that kind of stuff. Apparently, and it's close to reality now, there's a corporation called the Hyper Stealth Biotechnology Corporation. They've developed light-bending material, doesn't require any electronics, but it can hide a person, they say. It can hide a vehicle. It can hide a ship. It can hide a spacecraft. And it can hide buildings. Now, what I'm going to do, if I'm a coach in the NFL, I'm going to buy a whole roll of this stuff, and I'm going to wrap it around my number one receiver. That's what I'm going to do.
Except for the quarterback won't be able to see him.
Yeah.
Well, I guess you got a point there.
Yeah.
So wrap it around the quarterback so that they can't, I don't know. Anyway, it gets complicated. Life is like that. Anyway, this is what the American left would like to do. This is what regressive would like to do if it was possible. You know, we've talked about the censorship in China. We've talked about this whole dust up with the NBA, where the NBA just decided they were going to worship mammon instead of God. Remember, Jesus said you got to make your choice. If you cannot worship both God and mammon. You will either love the one and hate the other, or you will hate the one and love the other. And the NBA made their choice. They decided they love the god mammon more than they love patriotism, more than they love the flag of the United States of America. Well, here's among any number of reasons to be concerned about China. They have blocked 23% of all of the accredited foreign news sites. So if you live in China and you want to get the news of the day, you can't even get it because your government will not give you access to it. Now, you've got the left regressives. They want to do this in the United States. Facebook has tried to do this. Twitter is trying to do this. Google wants to do this with conservative sites, and they wrap it around hate speech and all that kind of stuff. What they really want to do is silence our voices. China is actually doing it. Here are some of the outlets that they have banned: the BBC, Bloomberg, The Guardian, The New York Times, The Wall Street Journal, and The Washington Post. None of those can be accessed in mainland China. Now, here's a good piece of news from the archaeological front and the biblical history front. Pontius Pilate was the governor of Judea at the time of the crucifixion of Christ. He's the one basically that sentenced Christ to die. He tried to wash his hands of the whole thing, but everybody still today holds Pontius Pilate. Could have done something different. He sent him to the cross. Anyway, one of the things that Pilate did, apparently to make peace with the Jewish people, he'd gotten crosswise with them, and he was deeply worried they were going to rat him out to the new emperor, and he was going to be toast. So one of the things he did, apparently, is he built a road with multi-ton paving stones. This is just south of the walls of Jerusalem. It's a stepped street that led to the foot of the Temple Mount and evidently was built. It was laid right to the foot of the hill on which the temple stood, and was built by Pontius Pilate in around 30-31 AD. They can tell this from the stones that they have uncovered as they are doing the excavation. About a third of a mile long, 26 feet wide. And I think it's virtually no question. We know that Jesus was an observant Jew, if you want to use that expression, frequently went to the temple, and very, very likely that Jesus himself walked on this very paved, stepped street created by Pontius Pilate. You know, in the family front, this is not good news. There's a jury in Canada, and they were dealing with the case of a 7-year-old boy. And the father of this boy, his name was Jeffrey Younger. The mom, they're estranged or divorced. The mom wants to send her 7-year-old son through puberty blocking and through chemical castration. That's what she wants to do because she's convinced that her boy wants to be a girl. She wants to transition him against his will into somebody called Luna. And this father loves his son, went to court to try to stop this insanity from happening to his son, because a lot of this stuff is irreversible. You have the surgery, it's irreversible. You get on hormones and block the development of in puberty and block hormones from doing what they're designed by God to do in puberty. You can't ever undo that. But the jury ruled against him. 11 out of 12 jurors said, no, this dad can't stop this. And not only that, but he's required by Canada law or by this jury, I don't know which, to affirm James as a girl. He's got to speak of her as a girl, speak of him as a girl, and he's got to take classes on transgenderism. So that's where that whole transgender thing is headed. You know, one of the things we need to be careful about, you know, we've talked about these drag queen story hours, and everybody wants to say, well, this is just all innocent stuff. This is just men dressing up in dresses and just pretending and reading stories that kids love. It's not innocent. A lot of the men that are involved in these drag queen story hours, Mass Resistance has done a great job in this regard about the only organization that's standing up directly to these drag queen story hours. Mass Resistance has chapters all over the country. They hear about one of these drag queen story hours. They get parents and citizens, and they actually go to the city council meetings where these drag queen story hours are being considered, and they've been able to stop a lot of these things. Good for them. I mean, they are frontline. They're street fighters. So Mass Resistance, great organization. They are working in the streets to block this kind of depravity from coming into our communities. Well, here's a story from about a guy who once worked as a janitor in a preschool. And he would dress up in a My Little Pony costume to entertain children at birthday parties. Well, it turns out that he has an affinity for child pornography and just got busted for this. Now, he was convicted in 2006 of a sex crime against a person under 18, so that would be most likely a young boy. Got a 6-month sentence, really should have been executed for this. I just think when we get to the issue of child rape, especially if there, well, I say with penetrative rape, if there's penetration, I think the death penalty has got to be called for. At a minimum, you use chemical castration. There are chemicals that these sex offenders can be treated with that basically dry up their libido. Their libido just goes away and they're not a threat anymore. So that's a very minimum that needs to happen with these guys. But the point here is these drag queen story hours, these are not innocent, harmless things. This is a place where sexual molesters hide. Here they are in a situation where they have contact with kids, can be the first of a grooming effort. So these kids are trained, they're taught to imitate examples, they imitate adults, look up to them. So these drag queen performers are presenting themselves to children as models to be imitated. And as this example illustrates, this is anything but innocent. Listen to Focal Point on American Family Radio. When we come back, I'm going to get you caught up to speed on all this impeachment brouhaha. So don't go anywhere. Stay with us, and we will pursue that with you. Democrat establishment, according to the New York Times, this is the New York Times, They are worried if there's anybody else in their field. Anybody got a chance against Trump? Be right back.
This is Focal Point with Brian Fisher on American Family Radio.
Howdy, and welcome back to Focal Point on American Family Radio, the home of muscular Christianity on Conservative Talk Radio. I have a correction to make caught by an observant listener. The story I told you about the father of the 7-year-old son wants to protect him from being basically emasculated, neutered, physically mutilated through surgery, chemically mutilated through drugs. That took place in Dallas. For some reason, I thought it happened in the country of Canada, and I have a little app that I use that strips out everything I don't need out of a story, and apparently I stripped out the location where this happened. It happened in Dallas, Texas. So it is everywhere. And again, what regressives want to do is they want to do to every parent who wants to protect the normative sexuality for his child, they want to do that to them right here in the United States. They've already started doing it in Dallas, Texas. This is amazing to me what they can get away with even right here in the United States. And, you know, we told you back when the debate about gay marriage heated up, one of the things I said repeatedly at the time, look, once you cross this threshold, once you cross the threshold that sex is for one man and one woman in marriage, period, once you violate that standard, once you cross that threshold, there is simply no place to stop. And that's what we are seeing right now in Dallas, Texas. All right. Well, let's turn to the Reid report for today. And this has to do with religious liberty across the pond. Jeff, clue us in.
Yeah, apparently a Chick-fil-A opened 8 or 9 days ago, one of the first standalone Chick-fil-A. So they do have some in malls and things like that, but this is the first standalone Chick-fil-A in the country of England, and it was met with a lot of protesters. So 8 days after that, that opening, the officials with the Oracle Shopping Center in Reading, England, said that would not extend Chick-fil-A's lease past its first 6 months, basically forcing them to close.
All right, so that's a triumph for the forces of sexual deviancy. You know, and Jeff and I were talking about this morning, and I was reminding him, look, the owner of Chick-fil-A, his last name is Dan Cathy. He hasn't said a word, not one single solitary word in the last 7 years about marriage being a man-woman institution. He's just gone to ground. He's in hiding. He hasn't said a thing about normative sexuality or the definition of marriage in 7 years, and they are still hounding him for that because his organization supported marriages or supported organizations that were defending normative marriage.
It is really amazing how Chick-fil-A has become a hate symbol, basically, for the LGBT movement. I don't completely understand it, but like you said, once that jacket is put on an organization, it's hard to shake.
Yeah, once they demonize somebody, and it's been successful, they've had some luck with it, and they had some success in demonizing Chick-fil-A. Once they have some success with that, they never give up. They never quit. They never let go. You know, that becomes your rap for the rest of your life. You're a homophobe. You're a bigot. You're a racist. You're a whatever. Once they sink their teeth into you and they have some success in demonizing you and cutting you off from the herd, they are never going to let you up off the mat. It doesn't matter how long you stop talking about the thing that upset them in the first place. All right, well, let's turn our attention here to this impeachment thing. This continues to develop, continues to roil. You know, there's a question, and the New York, this is 538.com. This monitors public sentiment, particularly when it comes to voting patterns and all that. So the question is, do Americans support impeaching Donald Trump? Now, you look at this poll, and it says that 49.5% of the American people support the impeachment of Donald Trump. But you go to the second page of this poll, and they break it down. 47.5% of independents support impeachment. 85.2% of Democrats support impeachment. You know how many Republicans support impeachment? 11.2%. Now, ladies and gentlemen, there is no way you can have a successful impeachment process with a nation that divided. Not with 88% of the Republicans, and the Republicans control the United States Senate. You only got 11% of the American people, and the reason these senators have to pay attention, why? Because their constituents are going to the polls next November, for a lot of them. And they're not going to want to get crosswise with their own constituents. If their constituents do not want Donald Trump impeached, they're not going to do it because they live to be reelected. That's the only thing that matters to incumbents. So they're not going to do anything that's going to jeopardize that. So this whole thing is not going to go anywhere. It's not going to succeed. In fact, I've been predicting all the way along that I don't even think we're going to have an official impeachment trial. We don't have an official impeachment inquiry, We don't even have one right now because only the House has the House has the sole power of impeachment. That's the phrase in the Constitution. The sole power of impeachment rests in the House of Representatives. It doesn't reside in the Speaker of the House. It doesn't reside in the chairman of any of the committees, the Intelligence Committee or Foreign Affairs. They can't call for an impeachment inquiry. Only the whole House can do that, and they haven't had a vote. They won't touch that. They don't want to vote because right now they're able to keep everything behind closed doors. All the testimonies, we don't know anything that's being said behind closed doors. The only stuff we know about is the stuff that the Democrats choose to release. So they'll have people in there for 10 hours. They'll cherry pick the little snippets that they want to get out to the public, that's what they release. We have no idea of the context in which those things are said. We have no idea what else is said. And so it's a very skewed. And see, they know as long as they don't hold a vote, as long as they don't create an official impeachment inquiry, they can get away with this kind of stuff. Who's going to stop them? It has no official status. Really, from a constitutional standpoint, we don't even have an impeachment inquiry. So don't let them lie to you about that. I mean, they're calling it an impeachment inquiry, but it's not. It's a sham. It's a farce. It's a charade. It's a snipe hunt. If they were serious about impeachment, then they would vote to have an official impeachment inquiry, and then the Republicans would be able to call witnesses. Right now, the Republicans cannot subpoena witnesses. Their staffs cannot conduct any of the questioning. The members of Congress can ask questions of the witnesses, but the Democrats control everything. It's all behind closed doors. All that ends the day they vote to have an official impeachment inquiry. That's all over. Now, all of a sudden, the Republicans can call witnesses. The Republicans can subpoena witnesses, even ones that don't want to be there. And they have to. So this whole thing's just charade. It's my prediction that we're not even going to have an impeachment inquiry. We're not even going to have an impeachment trial. You know, Nancy Pelosi was dragging her feet the whole time. She didn't want this thing from Jump Street. She finally just got stampeded into it. She finally said, look, I can't fight my own caucus any longer. I'm going to have to roll over and just do this thing. But her heart is not in it. So she's looking for an off-ramp. And that's the point of my column today at afa.net. What the Democrats are doing here in this whole charade is they are showing us how not to impeach a president. That's what this whole thing. Now, they have been planning this and plotting this coup d'etat against Donald Trump before he was even president. You can find articles about impeaching Donald Trump 6 months before the election. So regressives has been talking about this, strategizing, plotting, and planning since before the election even happened. But what they're doing and the way they're going about it is I believe they are creating a dangerous threat to the peaceful transfer of power and to the rule of law. You know, one of the things that's marked America from the very beginning is the peaceful transfer of power. Power is transferred all the time from one political party to the other. The vanquished president usually shows up at the inauguration ceremony, is shown greeting the vanquished, welcoming them into the White House for tea before he goes off to be inaugurated. The transfer of power from Obama, for instance, to Trump was peaceful. There were no riots. Nobody died. There was no gunfire in the streets. And the founders are very deliberate about this. They had watched Europe, and they'd seen what happens when the way in which power was transferred in Europe. It was at the point of a sword or at the point of a gun. If they had them, it was coercive, and it involved the use of violence. You had violence, you had assassination, you had rioting in the streets. It was instability, political instability. There was political chaos. Said, look, we're going to make that impossible in America. We're going to provide a means for a peaceful transfer of power if you have a chief executive who gets reckless and engages in what Andy McCarthy calls truly abominable misconduct. And it has to be that. It's a political thing. It's not a legal thing. It's a political issue. But if a president's conduct is truly abominable in office, doesn't have to necessarily involve a crime. It can be a crime against the political order in America, then that's when impeachment can be triggered. But that's what it has to be. It has to be abominable misconduct. And I'm going to go to the end of this piece by Andy McCarthy. I'm going to come back to it here in just a second. But here's what Andy McCarthy, who's one of the smartest guys in the world, if you ask me, and I have an immense regard for him and his perspective on the Constitution. And what he says, he has a long column about this impeachment thing. I got to find that quote in there. I got it highlighted and underlined, but I got most of the article underlined, so it's a little tough to find what I'm looking for. But he says the problem here is that Trump has not committed any impeachable offenses. There are no offenses for which Donald Trump can legitimately be impeached. And I got to find that quote. I may have to come back to it later. I think I even put 2 stars out in the column because it was such an important quote. Give me just 30 seconds here, 15 seconds, 10 seconds,
We
5
can play
seconds.
some nice music.
What's that?
We can play some nice music while you look.
Yeah, play some more of that Banana Boat song you played as part of the intro. Here's the quote. Okay. Here's what Andy McCarthy said. No, that's the wrong quote. I got 2 stars in the column, but it's the wrong quote. Anyway, forget about it. We'll have to look at that later. But in my column, I talk about this thing. Look, there are no impeachable offenses here. The interaction that Donald Trump had with the president of Ukraine was absolutely legitimate. It was perfectly appropriate for the president of the United States to be concerned about corruption. Now, remember, I want you to remember this now. Remember what Joe Biden did. Joe Biden said, we have corruption in Ukraine, and it's official United States policy to battle corruption in Ukraine. Ukraine has a reputation for being an entirely corrupt political structure. So it's official U.S. policy to combat corruption in Ukraine. And remember, Joe Biden put pressure on the Ukrainian government to fire the guy that was investigating his own son's company on the grounds of corruption. The prosecutor is corrupt. So here is the Vice President of the United States. Don't miss this now. Here's the Vice President of the United States calling for action against Ukraine on the grounds that it's corrupt. This is exactly what Donald Trump was doing. And in both cases, it had to do with Hunter Biden. In Trump's case, it was remote. It was a secondary thing. But the point is, if it involves corruption, and remember, Biden was in the hip pocket of Ukraine and China. How did that happen? I mean, Ukraine could push him around like a pawn on a chessboard. Why? Because they were paying his son, Hunter. He was making bank off of them, and Joe Biden didn't want to do anything to threaten that. That's corruption at the highest level from somebody who is a heartbeat away from the Oval Office. So that was perfectly innocent. What Trump was asking for was help for the investigation into the origins of the Mueller report. How did that whole investigation get started? Who were the players? Who started the rumors? Who talked to whom? Where did these conversations take place? That's what Bill Barr and John Durham are investigating right now. And by the way, I got a story here that Barr, in his investigation, he's heading this thing up. They have, quote, found something significant, end quote. We don't exactly know what that was, but NBC News said this. Justice Department officials have said that John Durham, he's the U.S. attorney that's assisting in this investigation, has found something significant, and critics should be careful. So in other words, they're on to something. And remember, they're looking at those FISA warrants. What was the basis for these FISA warrants? Even James Comey, a year after he signed off on 3 of them, he said, look, and they were all based on the Steele dossier, all of those FISA warrants that enabled the government to spy on Donald Trump and his campaign, all of those allegations, all of that stuff was just completely trumped up. There was nothing to it. And so the FISA warrants were illegitimate, and everybody that signed one of those, I mean, James Comey signed one on penalty of perjury. Rod Rosenstein signed one of those on penalty of perjury. If James Comey knew that he was signing a FISA warrant that was unverified, remember the law requires every application for a FISA warrant, every one, has to contain only verified, substantiated information. These FISA warrants didn't have them. Not one of them had this, because virtually everything in the Steele dossier was bogus. And James Comey likely knew it. So I don't know if that's what they're honing in on, if Barr is kind of boring in on the quality of the content in these FISA warrants or not. By the way, Hunter Biden is now fighting a paternity suit in the state of Arkansas, so his troubles continue to multiply. But anyway, the Democrats going about this impeachment thing all wrong. Remember, only the House can call for an official impeachment inquiry. They don't want you to know that. They want you to remain constitutionally in the dark. And remember, we're only 13 months away from the American people deciding whether Donald Trump is fit to serve as our president. Why don't they wait?
American Family Radio. You're listening to Focal Point with Brian Fisher.
Howdy, and welcome back to Focal Point, the home of the fastest 60 minutes in American media. Heading for the home stretch and the checkered flag, so buckle up. We had another story. I think this one was out of the UK. Maybe our listener can correct me on this one. But there's an elementary school that has this gender-neutral bathroom policy where the guys and the girls use exactly the same bathrooms. Jeff, are you going to help me on this?
Is this the one about the girls are developing health problems?
Yes.
Yes, that was in England.
In England.
Yes.
And so these girls, and so this stuff is fundamentally anti-female. I mean, this is gross discrimination against the female of the species when political correctness says you got to do whatever is good for women. You got to cater to them. You can't allow them to be discriminated against in any way. We'll take all of our wrath, all of our anger out on the males. They deserve it. They're guilty of it. They mistreat women just by existing. That's where the regressives are at on the issue of discrimination. Well, here's a school in the UK, they've got gender-neutral bathrooms, and the girls are developing health problems because they don't want to use the bathroom. Why? Because there are guys in there, and it invades their sense of decorum. It invades their sense of propriety. It invades their sense of privacy, and so they're developing health problems because they won't use the facilities. You're getting all kinds of health problems. Young girls are developing this, and so far the authorities are completely unbudged. I don't know if I mentioned this, but regarding let me open up the phone lines. The number to call is 888-589-8840, 888-589-8840, 888-589-8840. And my question for you, this is the question I want you to help me with. Do you think the Democrats are going to follow through on their threat to impeach Donald Trump? That's the question. Do you think the Democrats will follow through on their threat to impeach Donald Trump? 888-589-8840. That's the question. Do you think the Democrats will follow through on their threat to impeach Donald Trump? One of the problems with an impeachment train, once that thing leaves the station, nobody has the authority to stop it. Nobody has the constitutional authority to step in and call off an impeachment process. Only the Democrats can do that. So that's all in Nancy Pelosi's hands, whether this thing goes forward or not, because nobody, if she wants it to keep going, then it will keep going. Let's bust some sound bites, Rob, while folks are calling in.
This is pretty, by the way.
What's that?
The phones have lit up
okay.
like I hadn't seen. Yeah.
All right, well, we'll get to, you think the Democrats are going to follow through on the threat to impeach Donald Trump? 888-589-8840. We'll get to phone calls here in just a second. Here's kind of a cool deal. Clip R1, Rob. This is a cabinet meeting that was obviously being chaired by the President of the United States, President Trump, and he asks Ben Carson, this is a routine thing in these cabinet meetings, ask Ben Carson to open the cabinet meeting in prayer, and here's what it sounded like.
And we thank you for President Donald Trump, who also exhibits great courage in face of constant criticism. And we ask that you would give him strength to endure and the wisdom to lead and to recognize you as the sovereign of the universe with the solution to everything. And the people around the president, the vice president, the cabinet, the advisors, give us all an understanding heart and a compassionate heart. Those are the things that will keep America great.
All right, Ben Carson opening a cabinet meeting that was either today or yesterday in prayer. All right, number to call, 888-589-8840 is the number. Question on the table, do you think the Democrats will follow through on their threat to impeach Donald Trump? 888-589-8840. Let's begin with Jake in Arkansas. Jake, welcome. What's on your mind? Talk to me.
Yes, sir. I believe they will, because if it's not their way, it's no other way. And I don't understand that, I'm 62 years old, and I have never seen anybody go after the president like they go after President Trump. And, I have learned in my life that I wear his hats, I wear his T-shirts, and I get a lot of criticism because I found out that a lot of black people does not like the president. And I was raised to be a Democrat, but I learned that that's not the way to go.
So let me ask you this, Jake. So you wear the MAGA hat, and you get a lot of heat from African Americans. So they apparently,
yes, sir, I do.
They apparently think that if you're a black in America, you automatically are going to support the Democrat. But you're saying you've outgrown that mindset.
Yes, sir. I outgrown that 20 years ago.
All right. Okay, thanks, Jake. I appreciate it. All right, let's grab a call from Brett in Ankeny, Iowa. Ankeny, Iowa, where the caucuses are going to be held. And by the way, I got a story here. In Iowa, only 6% of voters in Iowa say that impeachment is the number one issue for them. 6%. In other words, what I'm saying is outside the Beltway, you get out into places of the country where ordinary people live, this is not a front burner thing for them. They're concerned about the economy. They might be concerned about access to health care. They might be concerned about national security. They might be concerned about border security, but they are not concerned about impeachment. Impeachment is just not one of the top issues that Iowans even care about. All right, let's go to Brett. Brett, what's on your mind? Talk to me.
I just kind of want to make my point when you ask the question. I don't think they have any plans on following through at all. I think it's nothing more than a dog and pony show and a political move. So when it comes time to elect the next president, they can jump up and down and say, well, I tried to impeach him, but nobody would follow through, but I'm the one that tried to do it.
Yeah, so
I don't think they have a leg to stand on.
All right. Well, that's an interesting possibility, Brett. They'll all want to take credit for it. They want to take credit for moving the train this far down the track, but they're not going to follow through. You know, I think Brett's probably right about this. I've talked about this before. It just seems to me highly unlikely that the Democrats are going to follow through on this because, number one, they've got Donald Trump hanging from the rafters in the garage like a piñata, and they're beating him to death. And they've got the compliant media and the invertebrate Republicans like Pierre Delecto are joining them. They're piling on Donald Trump while he's hanging there from the rafters. And they like what the mileage they're getting out of this. They don't actually have to do anything. They just talk about it and invite in witnesses and keep them behind closed doors so nobody knows what's going on. And they're getting some mileage out of this. They know the media is completely in their pocket. So the incentive to actually follow through, because once you have an impeachment trial and they lose, which they will, then they've lost their leverage. They've got no leverage. So we'll see what happens. All right, appreciate the call. Let's go to Darlene in Louisiana. Darlene, welcome. What's on your mind? Talk to me.
I do not believe that they will follow through with the impeachment process. One, they have no leg to stand on. And two, if you look at the facts, Donald Trump has done more in his presidency, even fighting off the Democrats and the news. And so they're just using this as a ploy so that people, when it's time to come for the election, they're trying to discredit him so that they think that they'll win. But I don't believe that they will. If people just really look at the facts, they'll see that he's done better for this country than anyone else has ever done.
All right, Darlene, thank you for the call. I appreciate that very much. You know, talk about the job that Donald Trump is doing as president. You see stories like this virtually every day. But here is a story reporting on this organization called Biz2Credit. I don't know who they are, but apparently a reputable financial affairs firm. And Rohit Arora, he's the CEO of Biz2Credit. He said this morning that Latino business owners are enjoying a 46% jump in revenue this year. Latinos, Hispanics, revenue is jumping 46%. That's under Donald Trump. So that's going to make it difficult even for Hispanics after a certain point to demonize Donald Trump. All right, appreciate the call. Let's go to Byron in Texas. Byron, welcome. What's on your mind? Talk to me.
Well, yes, I think that these Democrats are going to try to follow through with this.
Okay, and you, why do you think they will? Do you think they really believe he's committed impeachable offenses, or they just want to make as much trouble for him as they can?
Yes, they do want to make as much trouble for them as they can, but I just believe that they've given themselves over to evil spirits so far that they can't stop themselves. The evil spirits have taken over so much of their thinking and their actions that come into their physical actions that they just can't help themselves.
Yeah. Well, you know, I think you make a good point, Byron. And, you know, all of us know this, and Byron's exactly right. Demonic powers are behind this thing, but you can get into something and there's just a thing that just kind of impels you forward. Your mind's not really engaged anymore. You just keep moving forward, doing that thing, pursuing that thing, not even realizing how stupid it is, how much self-harm there is in it. And then one day you wake up and you say, what in the world was I thinking? And that's what Byron's saying. He thinks the Democrats are kind of on that auto glide path, or they're just determined to do this thing no matter what happens. And I think Ernie in Tennessee, let's go to Ernie. Ernie, sounds like you have a thought that's kind of compatible with that idea, this kind of mindless pursuit that the Democrats are on.
Well, Brian, thank you for your show, and thank you for what you do. I appreciate that. I'm just an old cowboy from Tennessee, and my dad always taught me, said, you give a horse or a cow enough rope and they'll hang themselves. And it's sad. I was raised a Democrat. I was a Democrat till when I learned all about the way my dad was. He was in the service and all, and I still have some Democratic friends. I do. But I'm telling you, they have lost their way. And it's so obvious that, you know, the Bible tells us what man will be blind. They can only see themselves. And that's what I think is going on. You know, every presidential candidate in the first debate raised their hand when they said, do you believe and support abortion? Every one of them did, Brian. And what does that say about the kind of people we want leading America? You know, whether you agree or disagree with abortion. I know the biblical principle and I know the biblical belief of that, which is totally in line with what I think and believe. But to publicly come out with them things, and if they do pursue an impeachment, I think it will be the destruction of the Democratic Party permanently. I do. They've got to, you know, and Republicans, some of them are not in a better boat. Some of them are just, you know, our world is, the culture is just crumbling around us. But, you know, the Bible says need not worry because believers will, we already know the end of the story. You know, It's just sad that us parents raising children today watch our children go through these stages of the American history that even our parents and grandparents didn't have to go through. Well, listen, that's me. Thank you for your time, Brian.
All right, Ernie, listen.
I appreciate what you do.
Okay, thank you very much, and I appreciate your phone call there. You know, I think this is what, you know, Ernie was talking about, the destruction. This could lead to the destruction of the Democratic Party. Now, it's not going to destroy them, but it could disable them. And here's the deal. I think these leaders of these parties are just not aware. They're holding a stick of dynamite, and they're getting ready to light the fuse. Both parties are. If the Democrats go through with this, it'll blow up in their faces. This is what Nancy Pelosi was worried about. That's why she didn't want to pull the trigger on impeachment, why she resisted it, because she's the only one, apparently, that sees the danger to the Democratic Party, that they could fall into a pit that they have dug for Donald Trump here because they are so out of phase with where the American people are at. And that's what I think they're not factoring in. Where are the, 6% of people in Iowa? I mean, that's as middle America as you can get. Only 6% in Iowa even care about impeachment. And yet this is all the Democrats can talk about. It's all they can work on. So there's an entire possibility of some real self-destruction here ahead for the Democrats. Let's go to Jerry in Nashville, Arkansas. Jerry, welcome. What's on your mind? Talk to me.
Thank you so much for taking my call, and
yes,
thank
ma'am.
you for AFR. I'm sick to death of hearing all of the. I'm sick to death of hearing about the impeachment. It's ridiculous. It's crazy. If they're gonna do it, get on with it. So it'll be done with and over. I voted for President Trump. I support him 100%, and I will be voting for him again in 2020. But
all right.
I'm sick of hearing this
All right.
impeachment.
Well, Jerry, thank you. I appreciate that very, very much. And I think we could get to the place, honestly, ladies and gentlemen, where it's the Republicans, because they see what it's going to do. It's going to go nowhere. It's going to blow up in the face. I want them to go ahead and call for the vote. Call for the vote to have an impeachment inquiry. If it passes, and it will, because, well, you will have to see. And Democrats have a significant majority, but some of them are going to start waking up and realizing they're on the edge of a precipice here. And it could be the Republicans that want them to pursue this and go through with it because they know that Donald Trump is not going to be convicted in the end. And this thing, therefore, will be a complete failure and a bust for the Democrats. Bow low before God, stand tall before man, stand in the gap, and never forget, we are fighting a winnable war. I'll be back here tomorrow.
The views and opinions expressed.
All right.